So a little bit about myself, and thank you, Abhyuday, for organizing this session on book reflection for the one that I was reading and took my interest, Theory U. I'm Gitanjali Sharma, based in Dubai, and I'm a certified PCC coach from Abhyuday alumni, of course, and I'm also on my MCC journey as well. I'm also a Gallup Strengths coach and do a lot of training and facilitation for corporate leadership development, etc. Overall, I'm also a licensed practitioner for insights discovery, which is all about colors and energy. And I'm also an associate with Aparian Global for the cross-cultural collaboration, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a tool that I'm certified for is inclusive behavior and inventory for IBI as well. So I'm on LinkedIn, and this is where if you want me to reach out for more information, that's where I sit. I was invited to carry on this book reflection, and one of the things which interested me was in my ACC journey course, the reference to Otto Scharmer's work came into discussion. And I am thankful to Draven for bringing that into the context of my topic of interest at that time in terms of listening. That was the primary interest. And then I got very interested in learning more about Theory U. So I got deeper into learning about Presencing Institute and other work of Otto Scharmer. So the context for today's discussion is, of course, Theory U. And there are other works that Professor Sharma has done. So you can refer anytime. And these are just for your information. So I can see there are a few more joined in. So hi, Sandeep. Hi, Vibhu.
Hello. Hi, Gita.
Awesome. So interrupt me anytime. This is a book reflection where it could become a monologue if you don't interrupt me.
Sure.
All right. So one of the things which I am doing right now, and I cannot do any justice to the work that Theory U has presented and the Presencing Institute by large has done in macro space, micro space, is to just take it as is, because I am a learner myself and I have no knowledge, no depth to the extent it has been used in multiple layers in understanding self as individual and society at large. So I'm taking pieces that are shared on the website by the Presencing Institute to talk about the reflection I have from the book myself. And if you have read this book or you have interest in Theory U and something bites your curiosity, jump in and share your perspective as well. So one of the things which starts the conversation on Theory U is about this blind spot of leadership. And it resonates with this idea about whatever you are trying to achieve, your KPIs, your objectives, your goals, and so on and so forth. There is a process behind. That's the how of it. But much more deeper, you got to go as a leader to check in these blind spots, which we all have. You cannot deny. In the entire ecosystem, there are blind spots that we all carry. And you have to tap into that. You have to constantly, intuitively listen to these blind spots to operate and be in this dynamic space where you constantly question yourself, the who and the how, the process, and what you want to accomplish, because this is a very dynamic environment. And in leadership, you cannot be just going with a fixed mindset. If I talk from growth mindset, fixed mindset perspective, you cannot just go with a fixed mindset to say that this is how I present myself, this is who I am, because you do have blind spots. So the book of Theory U, or the reflection, starts with this touching the blind spots. What are those? Are you allowing that blind spot to show up? Or are you allowing others in the ecosystem to support you in identifying these inner places where you have a blind spot? And it could be a source of energy, it could be source of multiple realities that you're not aware of. So that's where the concept of blind spot comes in. And that's the dipping point, or that's the point where the new you emerges. So there are 4 levels of responding to change, according to the author. The first one is, and it kind of resonates with the 4 layers of listening as well. So how do you get into this layers of change that comes in? It's transformational, of course, but what keeps you going is this action reaction quick fixes. It's a natural physics phenomena. You act, you get a reaction, then you react to that action, and things happen around that action reaction space. In that process, you can also look into the bigger system of creating a structure, a norm, policies, procedures. As you are acting and reacting, people start forming and creating that understanding when working with you. And in that whole process, as you go a layer below, you also transpire and reflect on the values that are created, the values that are evolved, the values that are taken back, and beliefs that are formed and recreated as well. Ultimately, the dip of the thing is the regeneration of a new you, or the sources of creativity and self. And you cannot do any of this in isolation. So as you are working and as you are thinking or as you are connecting, you're not just an individual self. You are in the whole ecosystem. So that's the dip of Theory U, and that's the curve that I think the author is fascinated by, this particular aspect of regeneration, the source of creativity and self that comes from really going within and focusing on the tip of this U curve that brings you back, because that kind of creates that energy to revisit, reform, and recreate. It's kind of Kurt Lewin's theory of unfreezing, freezing, and refreezing of change. So it kind of responds to that cyclical phenomena that is constant in our life and in our own individual self as well. I'm stopping here for any question, comment, etc. Another thing which is about Theory U is that you get to this process, and I'm going to talk about a little bit more on the downloading aspect. And mind you, this is just few bits of it, but when you talk about how you get through this process, you do a lot of reflection through observation. You observe, you observe, you observe. And then you go to your inner self. Don't rush. Let this knowledge emerge by itself. It comes because you are connecting to the source. That's what the book talks about. And that's what I'm learning as well. And then you act. So after your observation, you begin to recreate, re-emerge with something new or something reformed or something different, and you act on it. And this could be just your first step of creativity that again goes into the cycle. And there are 3 moments of you that you have to recognize as an individual. It kind of resonates, and I'm taking this parallel for the coaches here, because coaching is all a journey of rediscovering self. But at the same time, knowing the author and his inclination to look at the larger connection to the ecosystem, it's also the macroeconomics and global aspects that come into play as well. So this was the slide, or this was the picture that took my interest in the chapter on the levels of listening. And it is something that fascinated me most. And as a coach, you try and learn to get to this 4th level of listening, but it is a process of constant practice. I'm not there, I'm still working on it, but it is something very useful to have it in your back pocket and back of your head to step into this direction even a little bit. So there are 4 levels of listening. One is factual, just downloading, basically. It's just by habit. You are listening to whatever comes to you by habit. It's ingrained in you from childhood, from culture, from the values and beliefs that I have held myself dear to, holding me as Gita. And I'm reconfirming my old opinions and judgments. If I go back to the U curve and then how it emerges after I go through this whole loop itself. The second level of listening is about actually reasoning it out, the factual listening. You're comparing, you're listening from outside, you're going with an open mind. Logic doesn't make sense, but you're still listening. You're trying to make conclusions. The third level of listening is actually you're now listening from here, open heart. And it's empathic listening. I see you. I walk into your shoes. I'll walk few steps with you and I'll realize it's not easy. It's not something that I can do. I'm amazed. And that's the empathic listening. And the fourth level of listening, which is to the self, is this intuitive, generative listening that what you want to hold dear to yourself now as it presents you, what you have held very dear and had it from the past, and what you would like to let go for the future that you're creating. So open will. And there's, as a coach, you could see that shift which happens. As an individual, you can sense sometimes, you can grasp it if you're listening to yourself to that level. And it just fascinated me. It was in such simple way illustrated and presented. And there are different tools. If you go to the Presencing Institute, there are different tools that are given how to reach or how to at least practice open mind, open heart, open will. And the loop continues. It's an ongoing dynamic process. It just fascinated me, and I kind of resonates with me for most of the time. It's very habitual, level 1 listening. And then I have to tell myself, okay, what is the mind saying, heart saying, and then open will. What would let you in? What would you allow to let in and let go? So Sandeep, I saw you jumping in. Would you like to share something, or Vibhu?
So for me, it's absolutely, I haven't read the book, I have, but yeah, just curious to understand. And I was trying to understand the relationship between the first and this slide, and that's what I was trying to do right now.
The first in the slide, the blind spot?
Yeah, and yeah, so the blind spots is also something, yeah, that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
At each level, there is a blind spot. If I can go very, very peripheral on this understanding, and you got to be mindful of all these blind spots that are there. But the deeper you go, you have to connect yourself and allow those blind spots to emerge. And if I go one slide further, it's about this: when you recognize yourself and you identify the blind spots, it's fascinating that you do have a voice of fear coming in. Do you really want to hold that space as an individual once you recognize? So there's a voice of fear that you can ignore, or you can challenge, or you can overcome. So that's what hooked me so much. So I loved it as well, and multiple layers of explanation as well. Go ahead, Vibhu.
Gita, can you just elaborate a little more about the listening for from the source? Or if you have an example.
Okay, let me continue with the session, and then I'll explain with a close example of listening to the source. Would that be okay? Perfect.
What is source?
Yeah. So listening to the source, and mind you, I'm a learner myself. I may not do the justice, but here's the slide that kind of goes deeper in breaking it down from the structure of attention that we have as an individual. And what is interesting for me is that when I was pursuing my PhD, I was fascinated by this question about how micro as an individual connect to the macro. I never thought about global system. I didn't have that perspective at that time. So I was just looking at the macro organizations. When you change a system, who gets most affected? When you change a process, who gets impacted? It's at the end of the day, individual. So Otto Scharmer talks about this macro connection, and there is this very confusing, very dense layer of meso, which is, if I can talk from cultural perspectives, there are cliques, there are groups, there are stakeholders with different interests that holds that space so closely. Your middle layer of managers, if I talk from corporate perspective, these are your middle layers of managers who are preserving what is there as you hold that. So if you look at the ecosystem from micro, meso, and macro perspective, I'm not even touching Mundo, the global system. It's too far for me right now in the discussion to think. But yes, there is a landscape where you can actually stretch yourself and think from the bigger economics perspective. When you talk about awareness or listening, coming back to Vibhu's question, whatever your action you're doing, it has an implication. And it's something like what we talk about. If you say a word, in philosophical sense, if you say a word, it is still a word, or is it a whole meaning to it, a paragraph, or it's a story to you? It depends on the listener. So the factual listening, the listening to download just by habits and habitual way is on the surface itself. But if you look at the tip of the iceberg or the dip of the theory you got to understand that whatever awareness you are creating, you got to see the connection from the bigger picture perspective. We have different roles in our personal space, as father, as mother, or as child, and so on and so forth. We have different roles as leader in the organization as well. How my action, even a single word, can actually impact others. If we can go to that awareness of the internal source that is beneath everything else, there is this underlying action, there's this little space. And when I talk about listening, there's a very simple process of sender and receiver. In the whole equation of listening, there's a sender and the receiver. But in between, there is this very small space of response where you can actually think for that very little space, not to react, but to think. So sender and receiver, there is a small space where you can have the liberty to respond and take command of whatever is coming out from your system. So that's where the listening comes in, generative listening. And I'm not really sure if I'm answering your question, but this is just an illustration. Does it help, Vibhu?
Gita, only to some extent, because there are many authors and others who have actually kind of said the same thing that you have mentioned. Now, what I'm trying to understand is, then what is generative listening? I understand that to respond, it's better to think and then just choose your direction to actually take it forward. Now, just trying to fix this example with then what is generative listening? And just more of a clarification point of view to understand that.
Yeah, and generative listening is where you actually create this space of knowing it's not in my benefit, but in the larger benefit of the organization or myself or my family. I'm just giving different examples. It is going to help in the future. So I may hold very dear to myself a certain value or belief, and it is something which anchors me. But at the same time, I'm realizing that this value or belief has to evolve or recreate in the context where I am now or in the future for the benefit of all or whatever we think about. So if we talk about AI, for illustration, we are all latching on to AI and it's great, but we haven't seen the full impact of AI. We're still sensing it, and we are not there yet. I mean, ethics is all gray about AI because it's all so new and so fast to us. And who's responsible at the end of the day? The science or the makers? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but that's where it sits right now. And again, I'm going on a tangent, but I hope it illustrates what generative listening is about.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's where we are reflecting, and I think this is a very powerful question that you've asked about what is generative listening and where it all sits at the end of the day. So thank you for raising it. My attention was again about the individual and how it connects to the organization. And as I mentioned in very simple terms, these are the blind spots that fascinates me because we all carry one. And how knowing that we have blind spots, we can still operate and connect to the bigger ecosystem. And that's where this theory comes into purpose for me for understanding whatever you do, you're not working in isolation. You're all connected. And it is something which we have, as you mentioned, something not new. It's not there, but this is another way of presenting and learning and growing as well. So from coaching perspective, if I can look into the aspect of what it means from understanding of my own interpretation, that we have to really, when you talk about listening from open mind, is to suspend judgment, the biases that we have, the values that we come with, looking at things with fresh eye. Logic doesn't make sense, but you still have to have the patience to hold, refrain from your judgment, and go with an open mind. And it's a continuous, sustained effort of knowing there is a truth that is not known to us. It is something beyond. The second layer of learning, or the second level of listening for me, was this redirecting, sensing from the bigger context of open heart, where the presencing comes in. This is voice of cynicism. We all have our own hang-ups in terms of it's not going to happen, it will never work. Are you kidding me? And I'm going on a very peripheral level to just explain as an individual. And then once you recognize and you go past that, you come to that open will that, yes, I'm ready for change. I don't know how, but I'm ready for change. I'm ready to accept and transform. And what I see is emerging is really, really fearful because I don't even know if I can hold that space of the new you that is coming up or that new me that is emerging. Recognize the voice of fear, but not hold back. Because it is about creating this new reality and coming up from that curve to crystallize what is coming testing it out in prototypes. This is the new me. This is the experiment. And then performing. And it becomes your second habit, and then you go again. The whole cycle continues. So the thing that I have learned, and I've kind of connected from other pieces of my literature that I have so little knowledge about, is knowing oneself. The road to self-discovery is very, very critical to succeed in what you're creating for future. The inward journey is very critical. As a coach, from the coaching community, if I look at, we let people, or we allow ourselves to go into that journey, but many a times it takes multiple efforts. And it's all about surrendering to that inner voice that comes in, something that guides you. Even, I mean, there's no structure to it, there's no process to it, but there is some guiding principle that tells you it'll be fine, or it's a risk. And you work from that. Does it make sense?
Geeta, can I ask one? I just want to check, since we are talking about the context of the coaching, so there is a coachee.
Could you a little bit louder?
Am I better audible?
Now, yes, yeah.
Yeah. So in the context of the coaching, whenever a coachee, or for that matter, if I'm taking myself, whenever we agree to challenge our own belief or the identity that we are kind of held ourselves for ourselves, that's where you're talking about letting go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the journey then goes upwards, and which says that, okay, let me see what is coming on my way. And then you create a new you and create a new identities and create that what are the different possibilities that may come. And then this is how then you embody. I think I just want to clarify, have I understood correctly? This is how you're presenting in the form of a coaching. How does it happen? This is how it happens?
And you have stated beautifully. That's where the coach holds the new reality. So as my coachee discovers, or as my coachee goes into that journey where there is this connection is happening, I'm not there as a coach to disturb that. I'm not there to rock the boat. I'm not there to shake the foundation. I'm just being present. I'm there to hold the space. And if I can recall, this is your competency 8 and 7 resonating to the topmost, where you just hold the space to understand the who and how this is going to emerge into the new what. So I agree what you're saying. And this is where the coach becomes more, I would say, absent. He or she is there, but the coach becomes absent. It's the process that takes over further, because the coachee has already immersed into that dip to discover and acknowledge the self, and you are just holding space.
Yep.
Does it make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Sandeep, any thoughts, reflection?
No, I was just trying to integrate with all the other, readings that I've been doing, and I was trying to, understand the connection between Peter Singh's work and Otto Scharmer, and I had heard that the two have written together, and that was creating that curiosity. And when you started from the first slide, that understanding was not very crystal clear, but when you reach the third slide, it became more, it started integrating, and I could see the integration with ladder of inference and, how do you, this thing, yeah, I could. So I have not read Theory U, but yeah, now I can sense it. And thanks to Vibhu that even connecting it with, and you, that connecting with the overall coaching process is becoming clearer and clearer. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you go to his website, Otto Scharmer's, you will see there's a lot of collaboration with Peter Senge's work, and as you mentioned, ladder of inference and so on and so forth. So it's all overlapping. And I was discovering this from my coaching head, like, where do I fit in? You try to find your answers by looking at from your own individual self perspective. And it came as a wow to me. And then I looked at it and I said, yes, there is a voice of fear that comes in when you start discovering the new reality. And it's quite scary. And it could have implications, not only just for myself, but everyone around. I'm not even going to the macro side or the global side. I'm too small in that space. But being aware of it is very critical. And the coach holds that space by being present, but at the same time, not there to interfere with the process, the emerging process that is coming up.
Gita, in your reading, do you have any example from the organizational point of view, which in your way is more macro? How does, because organization also transform, not what they say has transformed, but actually they transform. And there are maybe limited examples. So how does possibly an example from there?
So I can share one particular example, and I'm not sure if it is on this slide or the other. Yeah, it's there. I had published a paper. This was part of my PhD thesis. It's about exploring archetypal change and the importance of leadership and its substitutes. Normally, in an organization, we would say that the leader is responsible for change. Leader initiates change. Leader is someone who brings in the transformation. And what I struggled with, and originally I started this work with structuration theory by Anthony Giddens, which talks about agency, the role of agency in bringing change through systems and structures. And in that process, the duality of the structure is so much that it changes itself. So as the leader is bringing transformation, the leader himself or herself is changing. So this particular paper that I published, it was a team of professors that I worked with. My contribution was in the space of data and interpretation and using structuration theory, but we then finally went on to the theory of Heinings and Greenwood. Incidentally, the story in very simple ways is about, its story is very simple. A person comes into the organization. It's a very small scale manufacturing company. The new leader jumps in. The new leader creates new systems and processes. Nobody buys in. Major resistance comes in. Nobody buys into the system. The new leader leaves the organization disappointed, defeated, completely voiceless, and decides to move away. But the systems and the processes that he initiated were there. And when the absence of leader comes in, the new leader leaves, these systems and processes now are training people to embrace what this new reality was all about. It was for their advantage. It was there for benefit. It was about systems that could help the accounting, the financing, the supply, the supplier, and everything else. So this particular study resonated with me when I was listening to this whole process of Theory U and reading about how it embodies change from the leader leaving the organization and then people recognizing the value or embracing or embodying the changes that was initiated by the leader. As long as the leader was there, it was constant resistance. It didn't really help organization move forward. But the leader leaves the organization and things fall into the place. So this was a 4-year study. The first year was very, very brutal in terms of new system, new leader, new voice, everything else. Second year, third year, leader leaves. Fourth year, you're talking the same language. So many a times you don't have to be present. What you create as systems and processes are good enough to move the organization forward.
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yeah,
This was a classic example. Of course, in the book, there are plenty of examples, and you can refer them as well.
yeah. So
Go ahead.
yeah, I am saying it actually integrates with the systems thinking of Peter Senge actually.
Yeah.
And in fact, when in BPCL, when I was working, we had done a lot of work around Peter Senge's work, and what I'm seeing is that Theory U has integrated them very beautifully. In Peter Senge's work, they were, to me, at that time, there is 20 years back, more than 25 years back, they were appearing as, individual pieces, and they're maybe the only piece that was trying to connect was through this ladder of inference. But in this, it has been actually integrated. That's what I'm seeing. Yeah. So it has really moved further, and this, and the case that you are sharing is something that we were trying to do. We were trying to bring about a major change in our organization from functional structures to individual SBUs, and to help everyone go through that change. We had gone through this program of Peter Senge's book, and yeah, it's beautiful how it has been really integrated.
Thank you. And Sandeep, I would love to hear more about Peter Senge's work and how it has influenced you in terms of, so another book session which Akanksha can book you in for.
Yeah, we have maybe there are more experts, but yeah, I would be who have really, who were at that time at the top, who were involved, and they would be actually the best people to, really share how it happened. And yeah, it was a very beautiful work that happened.
Yeah, then with such great work, you are just in wow. And whatever you absorb, you share, you learn, and just contribute. So
Yeah.
it's fortunate to have such experiences.
Yeah. And another thing, just wanted to add with Vibhu's, question and this thing. So we were taught two things. One was Coaching for Performance as a book, and the other was Peter Senge's book. So, and now, when you're saying all this and Vibhu's question and everything is getting integrated, and there were these like individual pieces, and I was just a plant manager at that time, and we were trying to figure out, and now, and though, yeah, and now everything is getting so interconnected in this book, and how you're saying it and how you're putting it forward. And that time, the people who were at that time thinking would have already thought about everything, but it was not getting communicated so well. But yeah.
Yeah, and the more I read about Theory U and the more I walked and got deeper into the Presencing Institute, it's just collecting and collating these different pieces of interesting work in such a way that it can make sense to me. It does make sense to me. I mean, there is an author called Carl Weick. He talks about sense making. And he talks about very simple, contextual, meaningful changes at individual level that impacts the larger ecosystem. So sense making is something which is, I can in the most reduced way can call it common sense, but it's not. It's much deeper in terms of how you connect the ecosystem. And Theory U puts it all together in a more eloquent way, elegant way of bringing ecosystem together from the global side. And I didn't even think about global. I was just very happy with my macro and micro analysis. But there is a larger element which is there beyond my understanding, and it was amazing to see that emerging in this very simple illustration. And since Vibhu mentioned that it's not something that new that we talk about, I can bring in scriptures to say that chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, and this particular thing, I am the system. I am the creator of the system. I am the implementer of the system. So if I bring in from the ancient callings itself, it's that I am the beginning, I am the end. And the duality of the structure and agency is still so pertinent in this context as well. And it's not something new we are learning, but it is there. It's just that we often disconnect ourselves and keep looking outside or on the peripheral surface itself. So we got to go deeper into the listening aspects and connect to that inner source and move from there. So closing reflection that I thought of very profound meaning to me was that what brings you here to this moment as a coach and as a coaching community? What I hold dear to myself and what am I willing to let go? When I'm letting go and holding something, what is it that is emerging and creating new? And how this realization is taking me forward and also keeping something which is of so much essence to me, and how is it is manifesting in those around me as well. That's my closing piece and closing reflection from the book. Any thoughts, any reflections, any sharing from your own journey would be helpful. In the end, I'm of course very thankful to Abhyuday for bringing us together.
I'm very thankful to you. I think that you have integrated all of this, and when you were sharing about that, so the Tattvamasi, in was coming out, and you mentioned from, see, yeah. So I think it's very beautifully integrated, and yeah, and somewhere when you were talking about sensing Margaret Wheatley's work was coming out, and
Okay.
yeah, it's I think it's all interconnected, and thank you for interconnecting. And I had that curiosity to understand that people are talking about theory U, and what is that theory U, and how is it how is Peter Senge's work connected with theory U? Yeah, but it's very beautifully done, and thank you for sharing. And yeah, it is a good integration that has happened,
Yeah.
and especially with coaching. Yeah.
Thank you.
Geeta, first of all, thank you for putting things together for us, for me, and taking this time out and actually doing this for not for you but for us. So thank you for doing this. Uh, Theory U is not new for me, but that doesn't mean that I know it well. What does it mean is that I've kind of experienced a workshop wherein this tool was used, and I've undergone that process. So that as a taker, as a CEO, some couple of months back, I decided to take it, went into the presencing, this site and everything, and try to learn. And then something held me back. I did not took it forward. So first is that that again came in, and I thought this would be good to actually spend time and actually go back. That's one. Second, I've experienced it a little bit in the workshop. I am undergoing that process wherein you're trying to create, in the process of creating more identities for myself. So as a receiver can understand it a little more clearer. Uh, as a work of a coach, when I'm practicing it and doing it, so can able to understand it better, more related there. I can relate it because I was into the corporate just recently and moved it, worked on multiple areas of changes and transformation or transition and whatever the name that we want to mention. So could able to bring in those things together but as thoughts when you were talking about this. So could able to relate few things out there. So thank you. This creates a little more curiosity about the subject and about the process. It's just an add-on, a good add-on that you had kind of brought it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, thank you, Akanksha, for organizing this. And I would love to hear more from you on your work and your pieces as and when the opportunity comes. So appreciate your time. And again, all the best for the 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.